Welcome to this video on a 15-mark question. We're going to be looking at both the pseudocode answer, obviously the question to begin with as well, and I will be programming this in Python as well. Now, obviously, in the real exam, you don't have a Python editor. You have to either handwrite or write in a text file your code. But I will be programming it as well, just obviously so we can see that this is a really good way to practice these questions actually. So let's have a look at the question. This question is from the 2025 UK paper, and it's obviously the final 50-mark question. It says a one-dimensional array competitor name contains the names of 25 competitors in a tournament that includes 5 events. Another two-dimensional 2D array competitor score contains the points scored by each competitor in the 5 events. The first dimension of this array contains the index of the competitor from the competitor name, and the second dimension contains their scores. Now, if you're confused already, don't worry. This is a very common sort of question where they'll have a 1D and a 2D array, and I will explain later on how to do this. But just note, obviously, it doesn't say what the sport is, but it could be something like a pentathlon, which is a really common where you do, one event is a sprint, another one is a 1500 meters run, another one is high jump, etc. So it's that type of event. So it says each competitor receives a score out of 100 for each event. These scores are manually entered into competitor score. Medals are awarded to the competitor or the competitors who have the highest points scored in each of the 5 events, the highest total points scored for all 5 events. So, for example, the overall winner who scored the best over every single one, so the high jump, the sprint, the 1500 meters, they've got the most marks out of everything, they get the gold medalist effectively. But also maybe someone got a higher score than the gold medalist in the sprint, so they would get a prize for that. So the one-dimensional array points stores the total number of points scored for each competitor. So we're going to sum those up, and then we're going to write a program that meets the following requirements. It takes an input valid scores between 0 and 100 for each competitor in each of the 5 events. It calculates the highest points scored for each event. It outputs the names of the competitors who receive a medal for the highest points scored, and it calculates the highest total points scored for the 5 events, outputs the names of the competitors with the highest total points scored for the 5 events. You must use pseudocode or program code and add comments to explain how your code works. So stick with one, don't change, always make sure that you don't mix it. And with the program code, that means Python, Java, or Visual Basic for this exam board. So don't deviate from any of those because you think, you want to be clever. You will not get any marks. You will get 0 marks if you don't use pseudocode or Python or Java or Visual Basic. So it says you do not need to declare any arrays or variables. All inputs and outputs must contain a suitable message. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the mark scheme, because it's really important when you are revising that you look at that mark scheme. So let's have a look at it. So we can see that we can get up to 9 marks for the first AO2 marking system, and then up to 6 marks for AO3. And there are different things that they're looking for those. But let's look at the first thing there. It says data structures required. So they always mean arrays for this. Some are 1D, some are 2D. But it says the name shown underlined must be used. So when we look at the mark scheme, we see that we've got competitor name. You must use that. Competitor score. And we've also got down here points. It's absolutely vital, as you can see in the mark scheme, that you use those and you do not deviate from them, even if you think that's not a very good name for an array. They are actually good names for arrays, so we will stick with them. So these requirements or techniques are basically what is listed in these bullet points here in the question. And it's just that they just summarize it into 3 separate groups: R1, R2, R3. And we don't really have to worry too much about how they've put them in, although you will see actually they have written the code or their pseudocode to reflect R1, R2, R3. what is good about this is that, for example, R1, where we input validate points for each event for each competitor, that is a really simple thing. We're just literally inputting and making sure that we have a valid output for it, but also because it says there all inputs and outputs must contain suitable messages, but we just do a simple check, which will be a while loop, to check that what the user is entering is between 0 and 100. So you can get partial marks for this, even if you think I'm not going to be able to do anything else. Add what you can. And I have had students who have literally just got maybe 1 mark from the 15-mark question when I've marked their mocks, but that 1 mark could push you above a different grade. So it is really important, even if you think, oh, I just can't be bothered to do it in the exam, do it, because that 1 mark could really help you. Now, obviously, this video is going to help you get a good mark. So carry on watching, because we're going to get more than 1 mark for this. Okay, so let's have a look and see what else they've got. So they've got an example 15-mark answer in pseudocode, and it says meaningful identifier names and appropriate data structures, variables, constants, and given arrays to store all the data required. I don't think there's any constants in this one, but yeah, you can put them in if you want to. Obviously, if you're using Python, you can't use constants because Python doesn't have constants. Note that candidates do not need to declare arrays, but they have put them in here. So we've got an array of points, which is 1 to 25 of real, and we've got highest, which is an array of 1 to 5 of real as well. They've got a variable called winner, which is set to 0, and we've also got max, another variable which is set to 0 as well. So we're just setting up our variables there. They haven't declared those, obviously, because you don't need to do that, but that's fine. Now, the first thing that we've got is we've also got here, we're initializing the array to be 0 here. You don't have to do that in code. You can do that if you want to, but you don't have to. There's ways of initializing an array without doing this. And we've got requirement 1. So what is requirement 1? We are inputting the score for each event for each entrant. Okay, so they've used a repeat until. I'm not a fan of repeat until. They are not great, but let's program this in Python. So our requirement 1, we're going to take an input, a valid score for each competitor for each of the 5 events. So I've come over to a Python editor here, and I've created my array competitor name. Now, obviously, it said you don't need to do this, but we need the array in order to program it. I've only put 3 in, so this is a good technique for programming if you use it. I've only got 3 here. We could, it says 25 people, but, we'd be here all day programming if we've got 25 people. So I've just put 3 because it allows us to test without it becoming too cumbersome with 25 competitors. So for each event, 1 to 5, we are taking an input. We're going to validate the score for each competitor for each of the 5 events. So the way that we're going to do that is I've got to have a for loop for those 5 events. So always think, if you're going to repeat something, how many times you're going to do it. The chances are it's going to be a for loop because you've got 5 events. So I'm going to say for event, and we haven't got an array for the events. We're just going to loop 5 times in range 0 to 5, so it's 5 events. And then also in that, we're going to do it for each competitor. So for each event and each competitor, so it's for, I'll put name in range, sorry, in competitor name. So we can use the competitor name array. We're going to print a prompt because that's what they want us to do. So print enter score for, and then the person's name and the event. And then we're going to get the input for that. So I'm going to put it into a variable called score equals input. And then I'm just going to put actually it needs to be a float because we're dealing with floats here. We need to cast it to a float. And then I'm just going to put a colon there so it's easy to see. So if I run this, it says enter a score for Sarah I mean, that says 0, so we could put a little bit extra event just to make, there we go. Let's try that again. Yeah, so enter a score for Sarah, event number 0. Obviously, we could name them, but with the sort of the time limit that you have, you don't want to do extra stuff. If you were writing this as a proper program that someone was going to use, then what we would do is we would put, name those events rather than use them. Anyway, let's enter a score. So we can just enter a score. It then moves to Mary. So it's event 0. So for example, the sprint, what did they score? And then we're moving on to event number 1, etc. So we're almost partway there for the first one. We've taken an input, but we need to validate it. So it needs to be between 0 and 100. So let's validate that. The best way to do that is with a while loop. They've used a repeat until. I'm not a fan of repeat until at all. It's not my choice of loop, and obviously in Python we can't use it anyway. So we need to validate that score. We're going to use a while loop to do it. So we can say while score is less than 0 and score is greater than 100, then we're going to force them to put the score in again. So we can just copy that up here and we can put it here. I've just realised I shouldn't have put and there, it should be or. So if they have a score less than 0 or a score greater than 100, then that we need to force them. So let's run that again, and we could say sort of minus 99, then yeah, that's forced us to do it again. So if I do 102, for example, again, it's forced us to do the entrance again, which is exactly what we want. So this while loop here and this sort of mechanism of checking is in almost every single exam paper. So try and learn it. The validation is part of the wider part of the syllabus where you are learning about the way to check a range. So it's a range check. Always make sure that you know how to do this because, like I said, it's almost in every single paper. Now, other than adding some comments, this is requirement 1 done. So if we have a look in a moment, we have got to put some comments in though. So loop around every event. Loop for every competitor. I'm not going to put anything for print. You could do if you wanted to. And something that you can do is you can put your comments at the end of the line. So if you have written your code, handwritten it on the paper, and you think, oh no, I should have put it above, just put it on the end of the line. That's absolutely valid as well. You can do that. So we can say, get the user input for that one, and then validate the user input and force them to enter the score if it's not between, I'll just put 0 to 100. Okay, so that's requirement 1 completely done. Okay, so our next bullet point is we're going to calculate the highest points scored for each event. So if we have a look at the way that they've done this in the mark scheme, let's look at that. A separate, so this is requirement 2. They've created a separate array called highest, which is what they declared up here. And it's basically just storing the highest mark for each of those. So yeah, let's get that. What else are they doing with it? They are outputting the name of the competitor with the highest score. Is that one of the other requirements? Yes, we have to output the name of the competitor who's going to receive a medal for the highest point scored. Now you could do this inside the loop that we've already done, where we are entering the highest scored. You could do this separately. I would do it separately because it helps you kind of compartmentalize different parts of the code so that you don't get too sort of worried about doing everything at once. So in the real world, we probably would put this code in the same loop to save iterations, but for the purposes of the exam, you don't have to have the most efficient code. It just must be functional. Just also realised that I haven't actually put, I've just actually missed one thing out. You might have spotted it. I missed out adding the score that's entered into the competitor score array. So let's do that. What I did here was I got the score, but I didn't enter it into the array. So let's add our array competitor score. And I'm just going to create that as an empty two-dimensional array. And then we're going to enter into competitor score the scores. The way I'm going to do this actually in Python, and remember you don't have to declare your array in the exam, but I'm just going to declare it as a two-dimensional array because it's just a lot easier. So I've created a competitor score array. I've given it blank entries. I've used a for loop to do this. Again, you don't need to do this in the exam, or not at least for this question anyway. And I've just created an array of 5 columns and 3 rows using a for loop. And you can see here the structure of the 2D array. Each inner brackets there is effectively a row. So if I put it like this, there's my 2D array for competitor score. I've printed it out. And I just did that off camera to save time. So we're going to enter into the score into that. So we're going to put, now when we're doing this, when we're inputting this, we actually need to change our for loop here, for name in competitor name, because if we're entering something into a 2D array, we can't use the in with just the name of the array. And it is a quirk of Python. It views this differently. It views it as sort of like a string basically. To cut a long story short, we need to change this. So we would say something like for index in range the length of competitor name. So I'm going to change this. And then we need to just get the competitor name. So we would say name equals competitor name index. Okay, so that has changed and got our name. And then once we're outside our while loop here, we can get the, we can put this into our array. So competitor score, and then it's going to be the index that we've just got there from the name. And then also, then it's going to be event. And that will equals the score that we've just entered, and that will enter it into the array. So although you might think, oh, this is really complicated, and it is a little bit complicated because no one said this question was easy, this is something that they use again and again. So if you can get your head around this, it's a really, they use it all the time in almost every exam paper. We have a 1D array of names, we have a 2D array of some kind of score. Sometimes it's a running event, or it's a cricket event, or it's whatever, marks from a exam, etc. Then we have a for loop which goes around those different exams or scores or runs. And then we have an inner loop, which is getting their name, and we're inputting their score, or we're using their score of some kind. So again, if this is your first time looking at one of these videos, just try not to get too stressed, because this is a formula that they use all the time. What we can do is we can print out the array as we're doing it. I'm not going to print it at the end. I'm just going to print it here so that you can see it being added. So let's just run this. Error. I've got an error, type error, because I've used curly brackets there instead of square brackets. So just, yeah, let's try this. So we're going to get Sarah's score first of all. So I'm just going to enter some valid data, and we are going to add it in. And you can see at the bottom here, it's all being added in correctly. So we've added the first event, we're now on the second event. And I'm just going to enter any sort of random data, and our last event, last person. There we go. Okay, so that's finished. So yeah, try and learn the formula for this, because like I said, I keep repeating it, they are fairly formulaic with these. So the second part, so for the requirement 2, we're finding the highest score. So for each event, so who's the fastest sprinter, who was the fastest 1500, who jumped the highest in the high jump, etc. Now they've got 2 for loops for this. I would say you probably don't need to do this in 2 different for loops. I would put it in the same loop and yeah, and output each one. I mean, you can do it in 2 for loops if you want to, but I would do it in just one. So one of the things I just wanted to point out about the indexes of this is that before we do the highest, is we've got here our competitor name array, and each item on that array is indexed. So Sarah is index 0, Mary is 1, Lucy is 2. And then in our array here where we've got our competitor scores, we've got our separate array. So we've got this data here, for example, that is index 0, and that is therefore Sarah's data. And this is index 1, this is index 2. So index 1 is Mary, index 2 is Lucy. So the relationship between the competitor name and competitor score is really important. And obviously, if we had 25 competitors, we would then have other array entries. And the key thing with 2D arrays is just to think of the 2D array as an array of arrays, and each row is a separate array. So we have our main array, which is our 2D array, but every row in it is the competitor data. So, we would have our score there, 45, and then a comma, and then 34 for Sarah, etc. So that's Sarah because it's index 0. Index 1 is another array, which is Mary, and then Lucy is index 2. And this is the key to understanding how the relationship is between these 2 things and why we need that for loop that sort of puts them together. I will go through this in other videos again, because like I said, the concept is the same in almost every single exam paper that they do. Okay, so now we've established the relationship between those 2 arrays, what we're going to do is we're going to find the highest. Now the way that the highest algorithm works, and you should know this already because it is part of the main syllabus for this exam, is that a computer will have to look at every single item in an array or item that you give it, and it will have to say, for example here, is this the highest I've come across so far? Is this the highest I've come across so far? Is this the highest I've come across so far? And remember, we're doing event 1, which will all be this index here. Then it will do event 2, so it will say which is the highest, but it will have to do it one by one. And it keeps a score of the highest. So we set a variable called highest or something very similar, and we set that to be a really high value, a really low value, normally 0. And then we check to see, is this the highest so far? Is this the highest so far? Is this the highest so far? And if it is the highest so far, then we cross out that value and we put in whatever the highest is that we've come across so far, which in this case was the first one was 45. So the lowest works in the same way. It's not in this question, but it is one of their most common questions, and you do need to know it for the exam. You should have had plenty of practice for this throughout learning in this subject. So if we look at the second bullet point, we calculate the highest points scored for each event. That is all we are doing. We're finding the highest for each event. And we're going to output the name of the competitor who received a medal for the highest points scored. So we need to kind of store the index of who got the highest one. We have a look at the answer that they've got there. That's all this is doing. The first for loop here is basically saying for every event, and then for every competitor, check to see, did they get the highest mark? So the highest, they've got actually an array to do this for each event, which is fine. We've, the highest, we can see that they created their own array highest of 5. So they've got 1 for each, instead of one variable of highest, they've got an array storing it. And there's 5 because there's 5 events. So that's all this is doing. It's saying for every event, then go through the competitor score, and if that score is higher than the highest I've come across so far, then that's what we're going to keep. Then the second one here, this is going to output the name of them. So it basically says, which is the winner. The winner is this person here. way they've done it is they've gone through the arrays again, so they're sort of doubling up and sort of saying, is that, so I know that the highest score was 95, for example, is this competitor the one with 95? Then yes. Now, this is probably not the way I would do it. And there is other ways, you know, to sort of print out this. You can store the index of whoever it was, or do it as you are going through it as well. That's absolutely fine. It doesn't really matter which way you do it, as long as it works. So I'm going to go with what they've got though, and I'm just going to use 2 for loops. So I'm going to say for event in range, and it is 0 to 5, because we've got 5 events. And then I'm going to do for x in range, or for score, sorry, I use for score in range 0 to 25. Or we could do the length of competitor score, which is 25. We're going to say if the competitor score and then event, so if the current score and the event is greater than the highest event, then we're going to set highest event to be equal to that current competitor score. So I'm just going to copy that. Now we haven't created highest, so let's just go and do that. So let's create it up here, and we'll just do highest equals an array, and I'm just going to set that to be 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Okay. So one of the problems with doing it this way is that if you have more than one person with the same score, so a tie, then you are going to not, you're just going to take whichever was first. But they have gone with this, so this just shows you that the exam board can make mistakes and their solutions aren't always the best. Anyway, we've done that. We found out the highest. We've set the highest, so it will pick out the highest score, is put it in an array, and then to print out who had the highest score, we're just going to put for event in range 0 to 5, because there's 5 events, and we're going to print it out. So we're going to say print the winner of event, and then we're just going to put event. We could put event plus 1. We'll just stick with the 0 indexed array, and then for score in range the length of competitor score. Then we're going to say if competitor score event is the same as highest event, then we're going to print their name. Competitor name, score. Okay, so I'm going to add some comments to that. I'll do that off screen because this video is getting very long now. So I'll do that in a moment, but I'm going to test this as well. So I'm going to test it. I'm going to do it off screen so that you can, but I will show you the results in a moment. So here is my test data, and I made Sarah the winner of every event. So I gave her a score of 99. So if we can just see where it starts up here. Every time it was Sarah, I gave her 99, and then Mary, Lucy 45, then Sarah, event number 1, 99, etc. So I fudged the data. We can see here that there's the array. Winner of event 0 is Sarah, winner of event 1, Sarah, etc. So yeah, it does work, but yeah, not wouldn't catch it if there was a tie. And here is my code with some comments in it. Okay, so we're nearly there. We have done our highest. Again, this is a very typical question, so I know it might seem like this is a lot of work, but they are very formulaic and you can do the same sort of things in each exam. So the last thing that we need to do is therefore the last two bullet points, we're going to calculate the highest total points scored for all 5 events. So they're not very clear of this bullet point. It says calculates the highest total points scored for the 5 events. It means per competitor. So they haven't worded this very well. Again, you know, the exam board aren't perfect. The highest total points for all 5 events. So we're going to look through our data and see and add up basically who's the winner out of Sarah, Mary and Lucy, who's got the total highest total, who's going to win the gold, the silver, the bronze, and obviously there would be 25 competitors normally. So we're going to take for this data here, that's Sarah's data, we're going to add it all up. Obviously we know she's the winner, but we're going to have to calculate it, and then we're going to do Mary, and then we're going to do Lucy at the end. So the first thing to do is to work out their total points, and we're going to add that into a points array, which I've just created. And there's 3 because the first one is for Mary, the next one is for for Sarah, then it's Mary for the second one, and then it is Lucy for the third one. Okay, so let's do that first. So for each competitor, we're going to add up their total, and we need to use that in the 2D array. Remember that we can just do this with 2 for loops. Okay, so for every competitor, so for name in range, the length of the competitor name, we're going to create a total for them and set that to be 0. And then for every score that they did, so basically for every event, in range, and it's 0 to 5 because there's 5 events, we're going to get their score in the competitor score and add it to the total. So it's basically total equals total plus the competitor score, but the part in the array, so that's the name, the which row it is, because it goes row column, and then the event score. So quite a simple sort of nested for loop. And then once that's done, we're going to add that to the points array. So points name equals total. And then we can print all that out afterwards as well. So we can do print, we'll just print out the total there. So let's run that, and I'm just going to fudge it again so that Sarah wins again, and she's going to get a really high score for everything. And yeah, the winner is Sarah. Good. So yeah, oh, I've printed the total rather than points. Whoops, that was the wrong one. So let's just change that. That should have been the points array. Let's try that again. This is where it's easier if we actually didn't have 5 different events, we only had sort of 2. It would save a lot of testing time, but I'll go with it for now because I've come this far. I don't want to go and change it all the way back. There we go. So there's our totals. So Sarah got 495, everybody else got 60. Now for the final thing that we're going to do, we're nearly there. Well done for staying this far. We output the name of the competitors with the highest total points scored for the 5 events. So basically the winner overall. Now, if we have another look at the way that they've done it, what did they do? They, for requirement 3, they have output, or they're going through the array 1 to 25 if the points equals the maximum, which is basically the highest one. So we're finding out who's got the highest points. So in that array, that points array that we just calculated their totals, which is the highest? So we need to find out the highest first. So let's do that. Let's do another maximum. And yeah, we'll just do that here. So I'll set max equal to 0, and we'll do for name in range, the length of points. So that's the array that we're looking at. And we're going to say if points name is greater than max, then max equals points name. So this is just your classic finding the maximum. What we could also do is we could store the index of that. So this is actually a slightly easier way of doing it. And actually, yeah, I am going to do this. I'm going to ignore what they've done. I'm going to create a variable called index. I'm going to set that to be equal to -1. And wherever we've got the max here, wherever we're setting it, we're just going to store what that index is. So I'm going to say index equals name. And that will just give us the index of wherever it is. So if we can see here, if we look at our data here, so to put this in context, we've got our points array here. This loop that I've just written will go through the first one and say, is this bigger than max? Yes, it is. It's 495. Is this bigger than max? No, won't do anything. It won't do anything. But at the same time, we've got this line index equals name, and that will store 0 because 495 is in index 0. So all we have to do then to print it out is say print the overall winner is, and then print out competitor name max. And that will just do it for us. So storing the index of where you set max, that helps you. So we could have done that in requirement 2 as well. That's why I was a bit surprised about how they did it. But again, if you wanted to do it this way, that's absolutely fine. There's always more than one way to do it, and they won't penalise you just because you've done a different way to them. Let's just finally test this then. So I'm going to do the same test again. I might give them slightly different data just because it then distinguishes them. And there we are. Oh, I've got an error, type error on line 66, doesn't like, I've done classic mistake. I should have spotted that before. I put max there, that's wrong. It should have been index. It should have been the index. Let's try that again. So let's just finish this off. And lastly, last one here. There we go. Okay, so Sarah is the overall winner. So that is the scores there, and the overall winner is Sarah. Okay, so that is the last thing for this. I haven't put any comments in for this section of code, but obviously this is already a very long video, so I don't want to put any more in. But you can see that, yeah, it's taken me quite a long time to do this, obviously because I'm demonstrating it as well, and I'm trying to make sure that I do the right answer. But I know I've said it before, I keep saying it again, try not to get too stressed by this because they are very formulaic with it. And if you look through the past papers, they, 9 times out of 10 will have a 1D array with a 2D array where you're doing either the highest, the lowest, or you're summing, which we've done as well. And therefore, once you've done a few of these, you'll actually learn very quickly that these are almost identical for every exam paper. So I hope you find this helpful. Please like and subscribe, and there will be more videos to come which will walk through some of these as well.